I'm face to face with my nightmare. The man who tried to destroy my life. And now he tells me he didn't kill my mom. I'm holding the key to his freedom, but my heart's hesitating because I don't know if this is another trap. Chapter 24. The inside of the house matched the outside, gloomy, old and rotting. Upon entering, my eyes slowly adjusted to the vast darkness and then began to take in my surroundings. To the left was what looked like a kitchen. Counters pushed up against the back wall, and a small sink was situated beneath a smashed window, letting the biting wind howl through the room. A thick layer of dust coated the surfaces, and with each step, a cloud of the gray powder puffed up into the air, causing us to choke. Large cobwebs hung from the corners, and I screamed when an equally large spider trundled along the wall beside me. Liam's locker filled the room while he doubled over, watching my panicked state. The big bad alpha is scared of spiders, he chuckled, bringing a scowl to my face. Shut up, I snarled, releasing shards of dominance that silenced him effectively. I turned back to the rest of the house and tried to imagine how it looked years ago. The small graying sofas in the lounge would have still been a fresh white color, and the hardwood floors beneath our feet wouldn't have been splintered and rotten. My eyes scanned the rest of the house as I explored, Zach never straying too far from me. Oh my God, I breathed when I turned down a small hallway and my eyes zeroed in on the deep crimson liquid spilling down the grimy wall. What? Zach rushed to my side in an instant and followed my wide-eyed gaze to the wall. He took slow steps towards it while I remained paralyzed in my place. I gasped when he reached forwards to touch the oozing blood, but breathed a sigh of relief when he turned back and told me it's dry. I nodded and turned to leave the hallway when I caught sight of something small and silver glinting in the moonlight that was streaming through another window. This one was only cracked, not smashed into pieces. Is that a bullet? I asked Zach, stepping closer and bending down. Sure enough, a small round bullet was wedged between the floorboards with small droplets of blood decorating it. I shared a nervous glance with Zach, and my heart seemed to pound faster now before it stopped completely upon the sound of something clattering in the next room. Liam, Zach yelled, grasping my hand and leading me back into that room. Quickly, I examined the room, trying to locate any threat. I'm fine. Liam's voice made me jump, and I turned to see him standing near a bookcase while all the books were scattered and broken on the floor. What are you doing? Zach growled. Liam grinned back at us before tugging gently on the shelving unit, which opened to reveal a staircase down to a basement. Whoa, I murmured. It just got creepier, Liam muttered, glancing over to us while I glimpsed up to see Zach's expression go hard. He locked his jaw and removed any emotion from his face. I squeezed his hand gently before he approached the top of the staircase and ever so slowly descended, with me trailing right behind him. I could feel Liam's presence directly behind me as I followed Zach further into the Arctic blackness. A small cupboard was situated at the bottom of the stairs, and as Zach slowly opened the door, my eyes took in all the trinkets on the shelves. Piles of books with pink leather covers stood high on the shelves, matching the diaries at home. A box full of random items was sat on the floor to my left, and I bent down to find a wilted rose on the top and a small brown teddy bear. On the top shelf lay another book that I opened to reveal beautiful photos of my mom and dad in both human and wolf form. Small writing was scrawled beside them, with the dates written, and some had post-it notes or secret love letters pinned to them. Tears welled in my eyes as I flicked through, delicately running my fingers over each photo, each letter, each date, as if I could bring it to life. Finally, I turned to the final page to reveal an ultrasound photo with my name scribbled beside it above the words "Our happy ending." Before I had the chance to cry, A scream echoed from upstairs and my head shot around to seize 𝐊𝐷𝐷𝐷. His emotional expression was replaced with dread and worry, and his grip on my hand was so tight it was painful. Liam shared our worry, and the three of us were frozen in place. The sound of all our hearts beating rapidly thundered in my ears, and I found myself holding my breath when I picked up on several equally fast heartbeats from upstairs. "Where are they?" A deep voice asked from upstairs, and I snarled before bounding up the stairs to where the group of people froze in the darkness. "What the hell are you doing here?" I roared, absolutely furious. Liam and Zach were quick to join me upstairs, and I still had the photo album clutched in my hand when I felt my claws split through my fin and my fangs break free from my gums. "We might have followed you." Ryder shrugged while I growled angrily. "It's a full moon, Ryder," I reminded him. "How dare you? So it's fine for them to leave, but not us," he challenged, nodding towards the two guys who stood either side of me like security guards. "I asked them to come. I didn't give any of you permission to leave, and this was actually private. Go home, all of you," I ordered, folding my arms across my chest. "What is this place?" Caroline asked, venturing further into the room, and completely disregarded my orders. "Caroline," I warned, and then turned to Mason. "You shouldn't be here. It's a full moon, for God's sake. Go home, now." "He can't go all the way home from here on his own," Caroline scoffed, taking Mason's hand and leading him round into the hallway. I stormed after her with my fists clenched and felt my eyes burning amber. "No, you will all go with him. Now, where the hell are the others?" I turned back to Ryder and Alexia and raised my eyebrows, waiting for their reply. "Blake and Jordan stayed at home. I think they were scared." Alexia rolled her eyes. "Wasn't it you who screamed a minute ago?" Liam laughed, and she shot him an evil glare. "There was a massive spider." She snapped him immediately. Liam's gaze flitted to my scowling face before he burst into a fit of laughter. "I don't care." I grabbed Caroline's arm and dragged her back through the house into the front door. "You are all going straight home." Now Ryder started, but I cut him off. "Now," I yelled. "We won't get home before the moon rises," Caroline announced in a sing-song tone. "Who knows what we might do if we turn in town?" She sighed and grabbed Mason's hand. "But you heard her." Now she imitated before turning to leave. Ryder raised his eyebrows impatiently and shrugged before following them. "I swear to God," I growled, not willing to risk them not getting back in time. They all turned back with smirks sprawled across their faces. "Don't never follow me again." Alexia shrugged. "We're curious. So why are we here?" she asked. "I'm here because the address was written in my mom's diary and a load of my parents' stuff is downstairs." "You're here because you can't follow the rules," I snapped back. "Well, I learnt from the best." I missed the fun Ella that always broke her dad's rules. She turned to Ryder. "Remember her?" She grinned. "Yeah, she was great." Ryder smiled as if reminiscing, and I growled. "Just don't break anything that isn't already rotten and smashed, and try and figure out what the hell we're going to do with him for the night," I instructed, pointing towards a pale-looking Mason. I then turned back to the two brothers, who looked quite amused by the situation. "Help me box the stuff up," I asked, and they nodded. "I want to take it home with us." Chapter 25. "Hey, Ella." Tyler called when the six of us returned to the pack the next day after dropping Mason home. He had quite a long night, sit on a grimy sofa in a dark, crumbling house surrounded by fog while constantly howling werewolves ran around not too far away. "Hey, Ty," I smiled and pulled him into a hug. Thanks for covering for me last night. I thought I would make it back in time. I explained, and he nodded before glaring past me. You're dead, he growled to a guilty-looking rider. Do you have any idea how worried I was? I was fine, Ryder grumbled with an eye roll. Well, I wouldn't have known that since you didn't have the decency to even call. Tyler snapped. Ryder, you can't just sneak off whenever you feel like it. There are rules. Yeah, whatever. Ryder huffed before storming off into his house, leaving Tyler to sit outside. He turned to me and growled in frustration, making me laugh. Sorry, I told him, honestly feeling bad for putting him in that position. Not your fault. He just can't listen to a single damn thing. I laughed again while Tyler sighed. It was true. Ryder had never been good at listening and following rules. It's the reason we became such good friends. We were so similar in that department. Hey, can I ask you something? I queried, and Ty nodded. What do you know about my dad? I asked, and his face scrunched up in confusion. Everything. He was my best friend, really. Why? He asked, confusion lacing his tone. I sighed before meeting his eyes and trying to read them as I spoke. Not that, Dad. He sighed heavily and ran his hands across his face before meeting me gaze. You know? It was more of a fact than a question, but he looked to me, waiting for my answer. Anyways, yes. I'm sorry, Ella. I don't know anything about him. I wish I could help, but they never told me who it was, and it never felt right to ask. He told me apologetically. How did you find out? He asked me. I found my mom's diaries, and it says in one that he isn't my real father. I told him solemnly. Tyler chuckled half-heartedly. Your mom and her damn diaries. I smiled back. I told your dad to get rid of them, but he said he would never get rid of their story. He shook his head as if the whole thing was ludicrous, which I guess it was, since my dad was unlikely to forget their story. Did she write diaries before he met him? I asked. Yes, apparently she wrote them since she was 16 and he kept them all. Tyler answered. So the identity of my dad might be in one of them? I asked, suddenly hopeful. It's likely, yeah, but I doubt your dad did those in the house. He knew how nosy you were. I nodded before remembering the few diaries that were stuffed inside the boxes we were returning with. But he might have kept them at the cottage they used to meet in. I asked, and a grin formed on his lips. You don't give up, do you? He laughed while I shook my head. Never. So that's where you were last night. It makes sense now. He nodded in understanding. Just don't get your hopes up. Your mom was always uncomfortable about your real dad. I don't know what happened, but she left him while she was pregnant with you, or he left her or something, so just be prepared for the fact he might not be a great guy. Okay? He spoke soothingly, and I appreciated his concern. Okay. Thanks. I smiled and followed the boys back home, desperate to read those few diaries and uncover the truth. How's it going? Zach asked a few hours later, bringing me a steaming mug of hot chocolate and some biscuits. He placed them beside me before taking a seat on the floor on my opposite side, placing a kiss on my forehead as he did. I sighed before answering. Not well. She sure as hell tried hard to keep his identity a secret. It's just him, or the baby's father. I huffed, dropping the diary and taking a sip of my drink. Thanks. I smiled gratefully to him. He smiled back. No problem. Sorry you aren't having much luck. Can I ask you something, though? He asked carefully, and I knew I wasn't going to like his question. Sure. I nodded despite my reluctance, and he turned slightly to face me properly. Why are you so desperate to know about him? I know I never met her, but your mom doesn't seem like the type to keep you from him unless he was dangerous or just not interested. So why bother with him? He spoke gently and held my hands in his while he did. Tears pricked my eyes, and I couldn't look him in the eye when I whispered, Zach, we don't have a single parent between us. I sobbed quietly, and he pulled me closer to him. If there is even a slight chance that he is out there and he might want to be a dad, I have to try. I just have to know. Even if he is a deadbeat, I have to know. The tears fell quicker now as I thought about the possibility of being completely rejected by this man. If the reason he wasn't around was simply because he didn't want to be, then I think I would break. Hey, Bisha. Zach. It's okay. I understand. It's okay. The entire time he held me, my eyes stayed glued on the pages of my mother's diary. I read every line over and over and over, looking for clues before flicking the page, and then froze. What? Zach asked, noticing me tensing. I cleared my throat as I reread the line again, my lip trembling as I did. Today I ran. I ran as far as I could from him. I called Alex and begged him to meet me at the safe house so I could tell him my news. I was pregnant. How could I be pregnant with 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐿𝐬's baby? I looked up to Zach. 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐿𝐬, I whispered through my tears. That's his name. Why does that sound familiar? Have you heard of him? Zach asked me. I shook my head and continued to read. When I reached the safe house, Alex was already there waiting for me. Once again, the sight of him took my breath away, and I felt myself falling further and further in love with him. I felt utter relief when he promised to keep me and the baby safe, and I knew that with him by my side, we could raise this baby to be an incredible boy or girl. I finished and looked up to meet Zach's eyes. She was running from him. I asked, my voice breaking slightly. It sounds like it. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he replied softly. I still want to know who he is, I told him, rising from the floor into the phone before quickly calling Tyler. It didn't take long before Tyler was round and Ryder, and the rest of my friends were only a beat behind him. What are you guys doing here? I questioned. I was eavesdropping, and we are here for moral support, Ryder explained, following his brother through the door. Right? I rolled my eyes but smiled a little at my friends. Too nosy for their own good, just like me. So you found his name? Tyler asked, and I nodded. Yeah. After I called you, I carried on reading, and this guy was Mom's boyfriend for a while, and her dad wanted her to marry him because he was dying and he didn't want her to be alone. She was going to, but then she met Dad and fell in love with him, and they had an affair. Apparently my dad fucked the guy in one, which meant he won my mom, but then she found out was pregnant with her boyfriend's baby just when she was planning to run away with Dad, but she did anyway. I explained, and he looked utterly confused. Dad told me about your parents meeting. He said they were from different packs and they fell in love, and she ran away to be with him. He apparently left out a lot of details. When I was baited to your dad, he told me the truth about you having another father and swore me to secrecy, but I never knew that story. Tyler explained. What's his name? 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐿𝐬, I told him, holding my breath while I waited. His eyebrows shot up and his eyes widened. What? He growled out. You know him? I asked pleadingly. Yeah, he muttered. Well, who is he? Is he in this pack? Ryder growled. I don't recognize the name, he stated while Tyler's gaze flickered to Zach and then away. I glanced up at Zach to see him studying Tyler closely. Who is he, Tyler? Please. I begged him. He finally met my eyes. Dean Tollman. Usually goes by Alpha Dean, he whispered, and my heart plummeted. It felt as though the world just crashed and burned, leaving me with this burning lie, numb feeling spreading through my bones. Alpha Dean, I whispered, my voice cracking, as in the one I'd killed. Zack growled, and I turned to meet his icy gaze. As in the one who tried to kill me, I mumbled, breaking into full-on sobs before Zack cocooned me in his strong hold. Chapter 26. I'm not entirely sure how long we all sat, silent from the shock. Zack didn't loosen his grip around my trembling body for even a second and simply whispered gently into my ear about how everything was going to be okay. I was eternally grateful to have him by my side and had no idea what I had done to get so lucky. He was so completely perfect, constantly there when I needed him, protective but understanding of my need for independence, safe. Finally, the immediate shock passed, and after an extensive silence, Ryder? Being him. Broke it? What the hell? He scoffed. This is so messed up. Ryder? Both Tyler and Caroline admonished. What? He defended, holding his hands up in surrender before they glanced to me, and he followed their gazes. He stared at me for a while without an ounce of emotion before he rolled his eyes. This would make such a good movie. He grinned, and I couldn't help but laugh. Despite his lack of class, I loved the way Ryder didn't sit around pitying me. I had enough self-pity to revel in without adding in everyone else's. I appreciated their concern, but I hated being looked at like some poor, helpless cub. He has a point, you know. Meryl Streep should 100% star in it. Liam grinned, making me laugh through my sniffles. Oh, and the Hemsworth brothers. God, are they beautiful? Alexia swooned. They are. Caroline agreed, and soon the three girls were in a deep conversation about the Hemsworth brothers. Guys. Mason snapped after a while of the guys simply staring at them. One by one, they turned to face him and then seemed to remember the pressing issue. Oh, right, Alexia mumbled. Are you okay, Elle? She asked gently. Yeah? I nodded, leaning into Zack a little more, just really confused. I'm sorry, Zack whispered to me, pressing a kiss to the shell of my ear. For what? I asked him, thrown off by his apology. Well, for killing the only parent you had left. He sighed and rested his chin on the top of my head. The only reason he was the only parent left was because he killed both of mine, and the only reason he is dead is because he threatened me. What the hell kind of psycho was he? He killed his ex-girlfriend, the father of his child, and then went after his child. I shook my head in disgust. He's sick. I know someone who might have some sort of clue as to why he did what he did. Jordan piped up, and I stared at her. Confused? Who's that? Gasped before I could. She looked at me before shrugging with a slight smile. Your brother. Or a half-brother anyway. She whispered, and until then, I had completely forgotten about him. Aiden. I nodded, now realizing Jordan was right. He might know something, and if not, someone in his pack could. I need to speak to him, I explained, pulling out of Zack's hold and striding across the lounge. Whoa. Hang on a second, sweetheart. Zack grasped my wrist and pulled me back to him. I think you should wait. Baby. You didn't sleep at all last night, and it's been an emotional day, and I think you should get some sleep tonight and then tomorrow. We will go and speak to Aiden, okay? Whatever he knows today, he will still know tomorrow. He kissed my forehead gently while he waited for my reply. I loved how caring he was. How he knew exactly what I needed before I didn't, how he could rationalize anything and put it into perspective. He was right. Tomorrow I could get my information, but tonight I needed some rest. And maybe sex with Zach. Yeah. Okay, you're right. I nodded and kissed his lips lightly before smiling up at him gratefully. You haven't really eaten anything today, so I am going to make some food. Does anyone else want anything? He offered. No thanks, man. I should be going. Mason told him, rising from his seat. I'll walk you home. Caroline insisted more than offered, and after a quick goodbye, the two of them left. I should go too. Leave you guys alone for a bit. Alexia smiled and said her goodbyes, followed by Blake. That left Ryder, Tyler, and Jordan with the three of us, so Zach started to cook us all some food. Need any help? I asked him from the next room. Nope. I smirked, knowing if I so much as moved he would kill me. Instead, I leaned against Liam's shoulder and chatted lightly with my friends for a while, not really paying attention to their "if you made a movie of your life, who would play you in the rest of the cast game?" I was too preoccupied wondering about the past. How could my mom ever have loved him? He was a cold-hearted monster who killed the woman he supposedly loved and her husband. I hated him. Plain and simple. Nothing he then could tell me would change that. Once we had demolished the food Zach made, which is per usual, with delicious, Ryder pulled me aside into the hallway. Hey, he smiled down at me. Hey, I smiled back meekly, finding a lump lodged in my throat. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he whispered, but I held up my hand to stop him. Don't, I begged. I hate pity. You know that. I reminded him. Yeah, I know. He grinned and kissed my cheek. You'll always have a family, 𝐿. Me, Tyler. Jordan. We all love you. You don't need some shitty dad who hurt your true parents. You don't need anyone. You're the strongest person in the world, and I know you're gonna be fine. I just wanted to tell you I loved you and that I'm sorry. You deserve better. I pretty much collapsed into his arms, feeling the familiar warmth of my best friend for a long, long time before he pulled away and gently pecked my lips. That's mostly because I love you, but also to piss Zach off. He smirked before leisurely strolling back into the lounge where Zach scowled towards the door. Chink, he snapped. Lips. Ryder laughed at Zach's snarl and then turned to Tyler. We have to leave now before he kills me. He shrugged, and I couldn't help but laugh at his carelessness. See you, babe. He winked before the two of them left along with Jordan. Let's go to bed, I suggested to Zach as soon as the front door closed. We said goodnight to Liam and then made our way to our bedroom and closed the door behind us. Can you make me forget everything? I asked Zach, striding over to where he sat on the bed and straddling him. Our lips connected seconds later, softly at first but soon. Our passion and lust egged us on, and before I knew it, I was lay beneath Zach's large body on the bed, tugging at his shirt. He pulled away momentarily to help me remove it before reconnecting our lips while my hands glided over every taut muscle beneath his soft, smooth skin. When his lips left mine, they traveled gently and slowly across my jaw and down my neck towards my pulse. Pure bliss flooded through me at his sensual kisses, and I immediately forgot about everything and relaxed beneath him. I love you, baby. He spoke between peppering kisses along my collarbone. I hummed in pleasure at the feeling and fluttered my eyes closed. I love you too, I murmured, dazed by his hands on my hips and his lips on my chest. Suddenly, cold air gushed against me and his touch stopped, When I opened my eyes, he was stripping off the rest of his clothes. I grinned and joined him, removing my own shirt and jeans, but frowned when he tossed me one of my favorite shirts of his and then frowned deeper when I watched him slip into a pair of boxers. No, 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 I groaned, pouting my lips in a sulk. Baby, you can barely keep your eyes open. I want you to get some sleep, he told me, removing my bra only to pull his T-shirt over my head. The soft material reached my thighs and was my favorite thing to sleep in, but currently, I hated it. No, I want you to kiss me again, I told him, reaching for his jaw. My palm brushed over his stubble D-chin before he pulled away and peeled back the covers. Come on, get some sleep. In the morning, I promise. He smiled sincerely and it melted my heart. Part of me wanted to give in and do whatever he said when he smiled like that, and the other part of me wanted to kiss him even more. I'll wake you up with your favorite method, he told me, and I was sold. There was nothing like axe love making to start your day. Fine. I pouted before hopping into bed beside him and sinking into his hold. I love you so much, Zach, I told him as his arm curled around me and our hands joined. So much. Chapter 27. When my eyes fluttered open the next morning, my mind was instantly plagued with everything that I had discovered over the past few days. It felt as though my world tumbled over and over until I had lost track of which way was up. Warm arms holding me against a broad chest reminded me that while I felt emotionally exhausted and utterly lost, I wasn't alone. I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to when Zach first came to town. My mother was still only missing, not dead. My father was his usual overprotective, bossy self, and not dead. I wasn't aware of the sinfully evil man that was about to barge into my life and burn it to the ground. I missed the time when my biggest issue was school and keeping my secret. But now my attendance in school was practically zero. I was turning into my father the horror, who in fact wasn't my father at all in either way, was dead now. Morning, sweetheart. Zach's groggy, hoarse voice greeted from behind me before his lips brushed over the skin on my neck. I hummed as a tingly sensation buzzed through me. Morning. Despite my darker thoughts, I smiled. Somehow, Zach had that effect on me. He could make me smile through anything. Now I did promise you I would wake you up nicely this morning. He reminded me as if I would have forgotten. But since you are already awake, he smirked. I released a growl from the back of my throat and grabbed his stubbledy jaw, feeling the spiky hair on his chin prickle against my skin. You can't break your promise. I pouted and he chuckled lightly. I would never. He grinned playfully before lowering his sinfully talented lips to mine, connecting them before our tongues tangled between us. When his lips slipped from mine and across to my jaw, I writhed beneath him from anticipation. I knew the path his lips would take, but I also knew he would drag it out as long as he could, simply to torture me. Zach. I whined when after about 5 minutes, he had barely reached my collarbone. His lips slightly brushed over my pulse point, his teeth grazing over my skin sharply before his tongue followed. My entire body was tense with anticipation as well as weak with desire. I wanted him, desperately. He continued his tortuous journey across my skin until at long last, he reached my left breast with his lips while his fingers toyed with the right. I arched my back as the pleasure hit me at once. His tongue circled my butt while he squeezed the other, and meanwhile, his other hand traced lightly over my thighs, teasing me. Zach, please. I want you inside me, I begged desperately. Not bothering with patience, I reached to yank down his boxers and curled my hand around his member. "Ella," he warned, pulling away from my nipples to glare at me. The hand that still grazed over my thigh suddenly snapped away to grab my wrist before he pinned them both securely above my head. "Please. Please, please, please," I begged, making him smirk down at me. I snarled from frustration before pouting and widening my eyes puttingly. Once again, he pressed his lips to mine, moving them slowly, sensually. Finally, I felt the tip of his member press against my aching sex, and excitement rushed through me when he pushed into me. The familiar warmth spread through me as he buried himself inside me, and at that specific moment when he was completely submerged, his tip pressing against my walls, I felt safer than I ever had. He was with me. Always. "Are you sure you want the cell?" Liam asked me. The three of us sat at the dining table with plates of bacon and egg in front of us, and until now, we had been silent. I looked up at him to see where he glazed in his icy blue eyes. I shuddered at the resemblance to Zach's. It was almost creepy. Why wouldn't I? I want answers, and Aiden might have them. Besides, he's my friend, so what would be the problem? He smiled back gently. "I know. I just think it would be better if you waited a couple of days. He isn't going anywhere, and in the past few days you have learned a load of new information. Give yourself some time to absorb it all." I appreciated his concern. I loved him so much for wanting to look out for me, so I mustered up the best grateful smile I had. I'm not really the patient type. I think sitting around for a while and dwelling on it all will make me crazy. I need some answers, and once I get them, I can put all this behind me and move on, I explained. "I understand." He nodded and took another bite of his food. "You know we are coming with you, right?" Zach stared at me for a few moments, waiting patiently for my protests. "Is it likely to change anything if I point out it's unnecessary?" I raised an eyebrow and sipped my drink while he shook his head. I placed my glass down with a smile on my face. "Well then, you should be grateful for our company." Liam winked with a grin. "Oh, I am," I replied. Not many people get the privilege of having a thorn brother on either side of them. I grinned while he winked again. "You only need one," Zach growled, making me giggle. "Every girl needs a boyfriend and a brother to protect them," Liam countered, hooking his arm around my neck and burying my head in his shirt. "Liam," I grumbled, struggling to pull my head away. "Get off. You stink." I gasped at the fresh air when he released me. "Shit, yeah. I went for a run earlier. Didn't bother to shower." He shrugged. Zach crunched his face up beside me in disgust. "Liam, for God's sakes, go and take a shower. That's revolting. Last I checked, I was the big brother. I'm supposed to tell you what to do." He challenged, and I swear I recognized his daring expression from somewhere. I wonder where. "Don't be a dick. You reek, shower, jealous because I smell like a real man. Worried Ella might realize she picked the wrong brother." He teased, coaxing a deep growl from his brother. I watched the two fight with high amusement while Zach retaliated with insults and threats, and Liam continued to mock and challenge him. "Are you boys done?" I finally asked when the discussion had turned into a growling match. Neither answered, but the growling at least stopped. "Liam, take a shower or stay here." "I am not going anywhere with you smelling like that." I scoffed, and he frowned. Zach held a smug smirk on his face until Liam responded. "You're welcome to join me, Elle." He sent me one last wink before running from Zach, who snarled powerfully from his seat. I finished off my food, watching him out the corner of my eye with amusement. Zach pouting was quite a sight. "I hate him," he muttered with a shake of his head. "Sure you do, baby." I smiled and pressed a kiss to his lips. "Love you too, dickhead." A yell came from upstairs, and I had to down the rest of my drink to disguise the amused grin that contorted my face at Zach's expression. Chapter 20, 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐬. The dentist's voice rang out through the thick forest that surrounded his territory. The three of us hovered on the border, waiting for him to arrive while his guards analyzed our every move. "Hey, Den, get your ass here so we can come in," I called back with a laugh. The guards frowned and took a threatening step forward, to which I retaliated with one of my own. Face to face with the large man, I inhaled a strong waft of his wolf scent. A hint of blood and suffering seemed to intertwine with the aroma of wet dog and nature. He snarled deeply at me, releasing small rays of dominance before he toppled to the floor from the force of my own splinters. I smiled down at him and retreated back in between my guys right as a den appeared. "Trevor, what the hell are you doing on the floor?" He snapped impatiently, frowning as the man staggered to his feet. "Not his fault." I smiled guiltily. He thought he was more dominant than me, so maybe it is his fault. I sent him an apologetic look, to which he shook his head with a smile and gestured for us to enter his territory. "So what are you guys doing here?" His eyes narrowed when a frown crossed my face. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, glancing towards his guards who, while standing like statues, could hear every word I was about to say. "Can we go somewhere private to talk?" I asked, and he followed the direction of my gaze. "Sure. Come on." We trailed after him until we emerged from the forest and entered a large village brimming with people. Scrutinizing glances were thrown at us while we followed Aiden, but I walked with my head held high, ignoring the hate that was stirring in my gut. Some of these people were there. They were present when Alpha Dean attacked. They fought my friends, my family, my pack, and they witnessed my father fall. Instinctively, my hand darted out to cling to Zach's much larger, warmer one. Seeming to understand, he squeezed my hand back and didn't let go while we continued. Once we got into the dense part of town, people littered the streets everywhere we looked, prowling closer or running in the opposite direction. Houses here were smaller than on the outskirts, and more children seemed to run about, some in wolf form. The adults appeared to be of a lower class than the others, with scruffy clothes and thinner figures. "Alpha Reed?" A voice bellowed from behind me, and I turned to see a man probably 3 times my size towering over me with a deep scowl set in his features. The man was not only tall but bulky, with muscles the size of basketballs bulging beneath his torn shirt. His large fists were clenched at his sides and were probably bigger than my head, with the knuckles a ghostly white color. His neon orange eyes blazed down at me, anger and hatred dancing in the flames that resided there. He took a step towards me, covering about a meter in that one small step, and snarled from behind his dark, bushy beard. Within seconds, Zach and Liam had stepped in front of me, not blocking my view so I knew exactly what was happening, but enough so they could easily block me from any attack. However, the man's gaze suddenly snapped to Zach and a sadistic smirk crossed his face. "And the boyfriend that killed my alpha. Aiden is your alpha," I yelled, tugging Zach a little away from the extremely humongous man. Fire rage flickered to me before he settled his gaze back on my boyfriend. "That's enough. Go home. Now Aiden is strong." Authoritative voice shocked me. He didn't strike me as the aggressive type, and after spending some time with him in the month after our fathers died, I truly question his ability to run a pack. They have to pay for what they did. Both of them, he barked, taking another step. Zach gently shoved me backwards and Liam steadied me before blocking me completely. I would love to see you try, I scoffed. He may be absolutely massive, but I was faster and more dominant. To back up my words, I released a strong force of dominance that had Zach and Liam cowering slightly while the man stumbled backwards from the sheer force. I released blow after blow of strength, watching with great satisfaction as he crumbled to his feet once Aiden joined me. I suggest you do as he says and go, I recommended in a polite voice. Satisfied, I released him and grinned as he scurried away furfully. I love that. I laughed, turning to Aiden with an appreciative smile. Sorry about him. I shrugged and turned to continue when I noticed the 100-odd pairs of eyes watching the scene that occurred. I glanced back at Aiden with wide eyes, and he rolled his before leading me away from them and towards the very center of town. A beautiful 3-story mansion stood proudly in the center of similar, smaller homes. Gardens decorated the surroundings and a large porch wrapped around the outside. Nice place, Liam scoffed, clearly intimidated, and I sent him an understanding glance. Will they be okay if they wait outside? I asked Aiden, pointing to the 2 brothers who frowned slightly. Trevor. Make sure 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐬 comes to these 2 while we talk. Anything happens, come and fetch me immediately. Aiden ordered the guard that fought me earlier. I giggled at Zach's frown. We can manage, he had her done gratefully, but with that. I followed Aiden in the house. It's beautiful, I told him, admiring the intricate decor and relaxing colors. Ornaments and trinkets from across the world scattered the surfaces, as well as photographs of Aiden and his parents. Thanks. He led me into a large office similar to my own and closed the door, supposedly to soundproof it, before pointing to a seat opposite his own. I took it appreciatively and swallowed the lump that had started to form in my throat. It was one thing coming here, but how do you tell someone you are their big sister? Or half-sister? What's wrong now? He asked gently, a mixture of puzzle and worry crossing his face. Well, I'm just going to be honest because I really don't know how to tell you this. I laughed uncomfortably before continuing. I was sorting through my mom's stuff and found her diaries, and long story short, I read that Alexander Reed wasn't actually my father. I explained and awaited his reaction. He simply blinked, shocked, and I took that as a sign to carry on. Anyway, I found some more diaries, and she writes about how she couldn't believe she was pregnant with Dean Tolman's baby. Which means that he is my father, Aiden. Your dad is also my dad. I whispered the ending, hoping to break the news gently, and then anticipated his response in suspense. His mouth gaped open before closing again, a look of utter shock exploding on his face. He was completely speechless. I know you might need a minute. Sorry to just drop this on you. I just really needed to speak to you about it. You're my sister, he muttered. Yeah? Half-sister anyway. I can fill you in with all the details if you want, but it's a long and complicated story. I just wanted to let you know, and I was hoping maybe you had some answers for me. I shrugged. I doubt I have any answers. I had no idea. He told me, finally meeting my eyes. He looked happy, relieved. I wasn't sure, but then I barely understood my own emotions at the moment. I simply nodded in response, allowing him a moment to absorb the information. Eventually he smiled up at me, and I felt it warm my heart slightly. I have a sister. He laughed. I thought I was doomed to not have a family. Me too, I replied honestly. I guess we aren't alone anymore. I know we are already friends, but I would love to be your sister. If that's okay with you. I held my breath while I waited for his answer, praying he saw this as an opportunity for family like I did. Chapter 29. Notice stayed and turned away from me, avoiding my apprehensive gaze. My heart sunk as I contemplated the reasons behind his sudden closed-off expression. He was considering how to reject me gently. I can go if you want, I told him once the uncomfortable silence that echoed around us became unbearable. I'm sorry about all this. I just thought you deserved to know. With that, I rose from my seat and smiled gently until his gaze snapped back to me and his eyes widened. No, sorry. Don't leave, he requested pleadingly. My heart skipped a beat as I nodded and lowered back into the seat. He wanted me to stay. I just sort of disappeared into my thoughts for a moment. He chuckled lightheartedly, but I could still see doubt residing in his eyes. What were you thinking? I asked in a light, friendly tone. The last thing I wanted to do was press when he had just had a bombshell dropped on him. He visibly hesitated, once again avoiding my gaze, which caused nerves to stir in my stomach. Doesn't matter. He shrugged nonchalantly. 𝐻𝐸. My tone indicated the worry I felt, and I sent him a pleading look. Please tell me what's wrong, I begged. I can't. He shook his head and pasted a smile on his face. So, are you okay with all this? He asked kindly. 𝐻𝐸. I snapped and gave him a deadpan look. Nice try, but that doesn't work with me. I don't let things go. So what is it? I pressed further and he frowned. After a deep breath, he smiled a half smile. Noted. But I can't tell you, Ella, so please drop it. 𝐻𝐸, if all of this is too much for you, if you don't want this, just say and I will leave, I demanded, becoming impatient. No, Ella, it's not that, he defended urgently. I do want this. I really do. I'm so happy that I can call you my sister. He drifted off, sending me an apologetic look, and I realized I wasn't getting anywhere by demanding. So I changed tactics? Why can't you tell me then? I asked him softly. You'll hate me, he muttered, and I froze. Hate him. My heart thundered a little as I watched his Adam's apple bob up and down from his clear nerves. What could he possibly be hiding that would make me hate him? 𝐻𝐸, I doubt I could hate you, I told him honestly. It took a lot for me to hate someone, and 𝐻𝐸 didn't seem like the kind of person who could incur that kind of anger. Please tell me, He halted, looking me straight in the eyes and displaying his reluctance and fear. Not nerves or anxiousness, but genuine fear. What if I told you he was alive? It was barely a whisper, but the words struck me like a bullet. Your dad. I hissed, overcome with shock and confusion. Yeah? He nodded solemnly and watched as the color drained from my face. I am so sorry. We brought him back to the pack doctor, and they managed to preserve his body until the full moon could heal him. We gave him some of my blood and he lived. I know after what he did or was going to do to you, I shouldn't have done it. But he's my dad, Ella. Wouldn't you have done the same? He defended, but he didn't need to. I understood exactly why 𝐻𝐸 would want to save him. I just couldn't fathom the idea that he was alive. He could have attacked any time in the last few months and I wouldn't have had a clue. The man who still haunted my nightmares sometimes was out there. Where is he? I asked through a quiet growl. My fists subconsciously clenched at my sides and I found myself seething. in the cells. I wouldn't risk letting him free while he was a threat to 𝐊𝐤𝐬. Please believe me. Your friendship was always important to me, and I wanted to ensure you were worth keeping him locked away, and you were. The words rushed out of his like a waterfall, spilling rapidly in front of him. Once he finished, he simply stared at me hopefully. I want to see him. The words were out of my mouth before I even knew what I was saying, but once they were, I realized they were true. I wanted to see him. I came here for answers, and he could give them to me. I wasn't scared of him. I refused to be scared of him. He was safely locked away in a cell, and I could ask him my questions and then move on. Seeing him again would remind me of my hatred and then of how incredible my real father was, and everything would return to normal. I don't think that's a good idea now, Aiden. I interrupted, not bothered about his opinion. He reluctantly nodded, and soon I was silently following him back through the house. Once we stepped outside, the view of the two Thorn brothers frowning reminded me that I still had a rather large, good-looking obstacle in between me and my father, maybe too. Hey, baby. Zach smiled lovingly, and as per usual, my heart skipped a beat at the beautiful sight. His smile was truly stunning, and it brought a smile of my own to my face every time he flashed it. Hey, I kissed him quickly and then watched him glance between Aiden and I questioningly. I need you to not get mad, I told him, taking his hand in mine and running the pad of my thumb over his knuckles. What's going on? A frown contorted his face as I took a deep, steadying breath. Dean is alive, I blurted, apprehensively awaiting his reaction. What? He snarled deeply, turning from me to Aiden, who looked like a deer caught in headlights, awaiting his impending doom. Zach. I pulled gently on his stubbled chin to turn his head back to me. I want to see him, I explained, and his anger bubbled into fiery hot fury. No. Not a chance, he snapped angrily. It's not safe. He then turned to Aiden. This was you, wasn't it? Zach, it's his father. You know as well as I do that if he could have been saved, I would have done the same for my dad. Don't blame him, I defended. He simply shook his head. I swear I will kill him again if I have to, he promised, and then turned to me. You aren't seeing him. No way in hell am I letting you go near him. Zach, listen to me. I came here for answers, and he is the only one who can give them to me. Now he is locked away in a cell, so I am completely safe from him. I need to speak to him, Zach. And I won't forgive you if you stand in my way. I stared straight into his eyes, so he knew I was being genuinely serious. I loved him, but this was important to me. He was possibly my father, and I had to know for sure. I needed to know all the details. I needed to speak to him. Zach glared at me for the longest time, his jaw clenched and eyes icier than ever. I stared straight into them, displaying my pleas through the desperate look in my own eyes, and eventually he grit his teeth. Fine. I kissed him, longer than I should have in the open than appropriate, while our brothers stood watching. But I needed him to know how much I appreciated his understanding. I needed him to know I loved him. Once I pulled away, I followed Aiden across the town again to a small building that looked to be in dire need of renovation. He jabbed some numbers into a keypad beside the door and then forced it open to reveal a dingy staircase. I shivered from the cold wind as well as the eerie feeling the dungeon gave me. I quickly pecked Zach's cheek before he grabbed my chin and forced me to look straight at him. Promise you will scream if anything happens. I nodded honestly and left the two of them there while I followed Aiden down the stairs. A long corridor stretched before us, and we walked the length of it before he reached a particular stone doorway. He won't know you are here until I open this door. Are you sure about this? He double-checked, and upon my nod, hauled aside the stone. Den. I heard his deep, gravely voiced greet, his tone indicating his surprise, but I couldn't see him. Hey, you have a visitor. Den spoke softly, glancing back to me as I took a small step further into the room. Before I managed to step into his view, he spoke again and immediately turned my blood cold. Ella? Chapter 30. Ever so slowly, I stepped to the side so I could see him, desperately trying to conceal all my emotions from him. My gut stirred with nerves when I came face to face with my nightmares once again. Our eyes met, and instantly, images of him snarling and fighting flashed into my mind. Images of my dad's blood staining the floor and coating my hands. Images of Zach, on the floor without a pulse. The sound of my screaming echoed around my mind alongside my mother's pleads and cries. My heart pounded in the back of my mind, booming over the sound of the wind whooshing through the cold, damp corridor. Dean was sat on the concrete floor with his arms resting on his knees and his back pressed against the far wall. He looked smaller than I remembered, no longer the bulky, intimidating alpha of the pack. It was blatantly clear that the majority of his strength and power had come from his position in the pack, and without his status and dominance, he looked ordinary. This is a surprise. His wide eyes fixed on me, and all I could think about was the fact they were the same forest green as mine. The sound of his voice had haunted me for months, but now it was softer and a little shaky. I take it you aren't here to let me out then, son? His eyes remained on me while he spoke, and my nerves bubbled up within me. No, I'm not, he answered, his voice equally soft. Not yet, he added. He then turned to me, and his expression melted into a comforting smile. I'll leave now. Are you sure you're okay? He asked, glancing at Dean, who now raised a surprised brow. Yeah? Thanks. Don't let Zach kill you, I whispered with a grin, and he nodded. I hugged him briefly before he walked away. With a deep breath, I turned back to the cage Dean resided in. Although the large tombstone-style door had been removed, thick bars separated me from him. How are you doing, Ella? He asked. He almost sounded sincere, but I knew it was just another one of his mind games. I've been better. He chuckled. What are you doing here? I'm surprised you were brave enough. You don't appear to be getting out anytime soon, and honestly, if you could leave, you are exactly in any state to fight me, I reminded him with a smug smile. You're no longer an alpha, but I am. You're no match for me anymore. He frowned, eyes narrowed for a moment before he continued. That doesn't answer my question, he stated. I'm here because I want to know if it's true, I explained, analyzing his expression and body language. He immediately tensed, and his eyebrows furrowed in confusion before they shot up across his forehead from shock. His eyes locked on mine, and for a beat, we simply stared at each other, reading the other's emotions that were laid out for the world to see. Eventually, he broke the silence. No, if it's true, don't play games with me. I snapped, crossing my arms over my chest and letting out a huff. Is it true? My tone left no room for avoiding the question, and his expression morphed from one of shock to nerves. Yes, it's true, Ella, he muttered, avoiding my fierce gaze. So I am biologically related to you, I spat, utterly disgusted by the fact. He raised his head slowly to face me and frowned. Yes, you are. All I could do was scoff. I'm sorry, Ella. It came out as a whisper, almost as though he was ashamed to apologize. Although his words meant absolutely nothing to me, so it was a mere waste of breath. Sorry for what? For killing my dad. For trying to kill my boyfriend. For kidnapping and murdering my mother. Or for trying to kidnap me. I snarled. I had never experienced this kind of hatred before. I had disliked people severely and felt only anger towards them, but this was a new level for me. He had threatened or harmed everyone I cared deeply for, and I hated him for that. His head shot back up to face me, and a frown took over his features. I didn't kill your mother, Ella. In that moment, he looked honest. He appeared distraught by my accusation, but I knew it was the truth, and I refused to allow him to victim as he himself. Don't bother lying to me, I growled, clenching my fists tightly at my sides. He stared me directly in the eyes when he next spoke. Ella, I swear, I didn't kill her. I loved her so much. I would never hurt her. I was out for the day, and when I came home she was dead with a bullet in her chest, but I swear it wasn't me. Tears were streaming down my face at the recount. I didn't want no need to hear this. I couldn't stand the images swirling around my head. Apparently you have forgotten that you sent me the video of you murdering her. How dare you sit there and lie to my face? I saw his eyebrows furrowed out the corner of my eye, but I refused to look at him. Do you still have the video? He suddenly asked, and I snapped my head back round to face him. Yes. I can't bring myself to delete it despite the fact it's imprinted in my mind, and I replay it nearly every night. I snarled. Ella, please show me. He asked gently. What? Was he kidding? Please. With nothing to lose, I tore my phone from my back pocket and crouched against the bars to his cell, holding the phone out so he could see it while the video played. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to block out the tormenting sounds. Hearing them again was like reopening old scars, and I couldn't do that. Not right now. When the blood-curdling scream rang out at the end alongside the booming gunshot, I glared at an even paler Dean and noticed the small tears falling over his cheeks. You don't have to pretend. It's your voice, I growled. He snarled back, louder than I have ever heard a snarl, and I backed away slightly. His eyes were the brightest orange I had ever seen, and his fangs looked ready to tear through flesh. Give me your phone, he ordered. What? No way, give me your phone. He barked out, and on impulse, I shoved it through the bars into his cell. I scowled as he picked it up and pulled out his own phone. What are you doing? My question went ignored as he began typing on his own phone, and the sound of ringing met my ears. Seconds later, a haunting voice answered the phone with a simple hello, and I froze. It was the voice from the video. I stared in utter shock at Dean while he seethed into the phone. Hello? They called again, and a few moments later, they hung up. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice shaking. He sounded just like you. Silence resonated through the cell while we stared at each other. I couldn't get my head around the new load of facts that had been dumped on me. He didn't kill my mom, and he didn't send me the video. So who did? And why? The tears continued to drip from my chin onto the already damp concrete floor, and my entire body trembled a little. He's my brother. Dean hissed, and I could hear his teeth grinding against each other. You have a brother? I asked, shocked. I thought one was bad enough, but two of them. And more importantly, another evil one who murdered my mother. I didn't think I could handle that. Not once I kill him, I won't, he barked. My eyes widened when it became clear he wasn't joking. He genuinely wanted his brother dead. Did that make him a friend or an enemy? However, I can't do that from in here. He grinned again. That evil, twisted grin, and I gulped. The keys hung a few meters from me and they were numbered, so I knew exactly how to get him out. Nobody was down here to stop me, but nobody was down here to save me either. Chapter 31. I found myself with the key to cell number 8 dangling from my forefinger while I stared into the eyes of the soulless man who resided in the very same cell. Why should I do this? I questioned aloud. Just because you might not have killed her doesn't mean you are any less dangerous to me and my family. I narrowed my eyes to watch a look of exasperation cross his face. Ella, I never meant to kill your father. My intention was to harm him enough to stop him from interfering, but he was determined to die before I got to you, so that's what had to happen. He looked up at me with small flickers of hope in his eyes, begging me to believe the lies that spouted from his mouth. Maybe you shouldn't have been trying to kidnap his daughter. I paused and shook my head. Your daughter in the first place. You never would have had to hurt him if you weren't so hell-bent on hurting me. I snapped, aggravated. He sighed once again. I was never planning on hurting you. I'm not a monster, Ella. Your parents took you from me and denied me from ever being a part of your life. A flicker of sadness crossed his face and I frowned. I was angry and acted out of rage, but I only ever wanted you to know me. I scoffed. Why should I believe you? I growled deeply. You shouldn't. He shrugged incredulously. That would be naive and stupid. But I am giving you my word that I have no desire to harm you or your family. My target is my brother. He killed the woman I loved and I want to know why, and I want justice to be brought upon him. I know you want that too, so open the door and we can both get what we want. He finally rose from the floor and crossed his arms over his chest, awaiting my decision. I stared blankly at the man before me. His sunken eyes blinked back at me, waiting for my next move, but I remained frozen. You haven't had Moonlight in a long time, and by the looks of it, not much sleep either. You're no longer an alpha, but I am. That makes me stronger, faster and more dominant than you. If you even try to hurt anyone I care about, I will tear your heart from your chest myself. I warned, throwing the key into the cell. I'll be upstairs, I told him, turning on my heels and leaving the dungeon with my heart jumping in my throat. What the hell had I just done? The light was blinding from outside when I reached the staircase, and as I climbed, the voices of my brother and boyfriend floated through the air and I gulped. Ascending the stairs ever so slowly, I gazed up at the three boys who all focused their undivided attention on me. Hey, Aiden greeted with a soft smile that mirrored the others. Guilt gnawed at me. I should have checked in with him first. It was his dad too, and this was his territory. I had no right to strut around making decisions about his prisoners. Sweetheart, are you okay? Zach asked, approaching the top of the stairs quickly and placing a kiss to my cheek. I squeezed my eyes closed and took a shaky breath. Please don't get mad, I begged him, taking his hand and rubbing my thumb over his tense knuckles while knowing full well he was going to go ballistic. Mad about what? He frowned, raising a brow at me. Just promise, none of you will get mad. I sent the three of them a pleading look, which was returned with worry and suspicion. What did you do? Aiden asked, taking a step closer alongside Liam. I'm sorry. I let me out. Dean's cool voice echoed from behind me, and when I turned, a smug grin sprawled lazily across his face while he took in every own a shocked silence. As expected, I went hurtling backwards until Zach's bulky frame towered over me, blocking me from Dean's view completely. "What the hell?" Aiden growled, joining Zach while Liam glared at me. "Well, I guess this time I will have to make sure you stay dead." Zach snarled and charged forward while Dean took up a defensive stance. "No, don't." I ran at him and grabbed his arm quickly. "Please don't," I begged, staring up into his cool blue eyes. "Zach." My plead was clear and he relaxed a little in my hold. "Why not?" He frowned, glaring at Dean and then repositioning me behind him. "Because he might not be as evil as we thought," I told him with an exasperated sigh. "He might be, but he might not be." "What are you talking about?" "He tried to kill you a few months ago," Zach reminded me, moving the strand of my hair behind my ear and gazing down at me with a pained expression. Like even the thought of it hurt too much. "Actually, it was never my plan to kill her," Dean called, shaking his head. "Her parents took her away from me. I was simply going to take her back. But then, people got in my way, so I had to resort to more violence than I initially intended." He shrugged as though it was not a big deal, and my anger stirred within me. "That doesn't make it okay," I snapped, scowling in his direction before turning back to Zach. "It wasn't him who killed my mom." We rang the number that sent me that video and someone else answered. Someone who sounded exactly like him. "My brother. Always been a bit of a bastard, but I didn't think he would ever go that far." "I want to know why." Dean finished and Zach spent a few moments in silence, glimpsing between the two of us with an absent expression. "I still want answers, Zach." "And so does he," which for now puts us on the same side, I whispered, squeezing his hand gently. "I don't trust him," he stated, shaking his head at me. I'm distraught. "The man who killed me doesn't trust me." Dean rolled his eyes with a scoff. "My daughter does, so you will just have to deal with it," he told him with a smug grin. I whipped my head back around to face him, my eyes bugging out of my skull. "Firstly, I don't trust you. Not one bit. We might have the same goal, but I don't trust anything that comes out of your mouth. Secondly, you are not my father. My father is dead. Because of you. And I will never forgive you for that," I snarled. His face fell a little, but he quickly masked it with a look of indifference. "Regardless, you need me if you want to know why your mom's dead. So you're going to have a little faith," he grinned. Zach snarled beside me. "Faith. After everything you've done. After the lives you took and the threats you sent. After all the torment you put your own daughter through, you think you deserve any kind of trust or respect." He growled and took a threatening step towards him. "What are you talking about? Threats?" He raised an eyebrow in confusion. I furrowed my brows in anger. "The phone calls. The random people giving me messages from you. The attacks on my friends. Don't you dare blame those on your brother as well." I spat, taking Zach's hand and stepping backwards. "What?" He frowned over at me. "I didn't send you any threats. What would I gain from harming your friends? I called your father once to let him know that I was coming and that I wouldn't stop until I got to see you. That was it." He sounded genuine, and I was taken aback by how desperately I wanted to believe him. But I couldn't. "You're a liar and I hate you. I hate you for what you did to my dad. I hate you for taking my mom from me when I needed her, whether it was you who killed her or not. I hate you for trying to hurt my boyfriend. I hate you for tormenting me and threatening me. I hate you for attacking my closest friends. I let you out. So go ahead and hunt down your brother, but stay the hell away from me. I spat, turning away and storming off 𝐻𝐻's territory with tears cascading down my cheeks. Ella? I heard him call, but I ignored his plea and charged ahead, finally letting out a breath when 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 fell into step beside me.